And for those who don't know me, my name is Margot Crawford. I'm the founder and CEO of Business Sherpa Group, and joining me is Todd Lukasavage, who is our general manager, as well as Leanne Bell, who is, excuse me, head of our marketing, and will be helping run the event. So what maybe what I'll do is I'll just very quickly jump to my screen share, and I may toggle in and out of this because I am hoping that we're going to be able to get a little bit of discussion going from the experiences of last week. But let me just jump to my screen share. If you would just give me a moment to, here we go. Okay, there we go. So I'm hoping people can see my screen fine. Leanne, can you confirm that? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Oops, I just realized I gotta toggle this, excuse me. So, so again, want to welcome everybody to our second workshop in optimizing the internal business operations with People Plus Technology. And just a little bit of an overview of what we're going to cover today, as well as some housekeeping and so on, and how we're going to run things. You know, as we mentioned last on the last session, we really do want this to be a learning workshop where you're getting really good content and ideas, and we're experimenting, frankly, in terms of format with respect to how do we engage people on the group in a virtual way. And, you know, just we'll continue to try different things. So if we try something, it doesn't work out, that's fine. And let's just consider it an experiment tried. And we will be running these workshops periodically over the coming months in different geographies, as well as repeating here in Ottawa as well, and broader. I think we've got some people broader than Ottawa. So if there's content that you think others might want to hear again, so on, please absolutely let them know about that. So what we wanted to cover today, well, first of all, maybe just some housekeeping. So first of all, we will, like I say, invite people to add their comments, ask their questions throughout. At some point in time, we might drop out of the screen share and see if I can get some dialogue going. If that doesn't happen, don't worry about it. I know people don't necessarily want to engage that way, but we'll give it a try. But please, if you do have some comments, put them in chat. Leanne will be monitoring those. And if there's questions that pop up, you know, we'll try to take those as we can. And we will be recording this session. So just so that you're aware of that, you know, obviously just, you know, want to be able to sort of look back at that and see how we do. The other thing was that we also, towards the end, time permitting, we're going to have a bit of an open forum because we do think there might be value in what people are hearing and their own experiences. So if you're able and willing to participate in some of that, that's great. And we do plan on keeping the Zoom call open for 10 minutes after, in case we go right up to the end, in case there's questions. If not, that's fine, no problem at all. You also received, prior to this session, and Leanne's included it in the link, a link to the workbook. Really, the bulk of the content that we're presenting here is in the workbook, as well as it's connected to a link that creates the linkage to an Excel workbook with all the tools in there to try to keep it in one spot. We want you to walk away with a lot of tools. Okay, and I think that that's it for housekeeping. In terms of the agenda today, we're going to do, so for those who are joining us new, who weren't participating last week, we did actually have a bit of homework that we wanted to see if people could try, and don't worry if you didn't get to it, and really we wanted the opportunity to kind of see how that went. We'll do a little bit of a review of that. Today what we really want to do is now get into the next part. Last week we really covered off planning and getting ready and figuring out where your priorities are for technology, and now we want to get into how do you implement. So we're going to go over the resources needed, technology selection process, implementation best practices, and then adoption and change management. And as I said, at the end we'll have a bit of an open forum for Q&A. Okay, so just to maybe before we go into the review, just a quick recap. And this is a repeat of what we had said last week of why digitization is a priority. And of course, we're being forced into it because of the situation of what is happening. And certainly most organizations have had technology probably in their strategy for a long time. And it either, just falls away, or it's not the investment at the time, or it's not elevated into the level of prioritization it is now. So the good news is that anybody who's been wanting to drive this forward in their organization, this has really gotten it to sort of the center stage. But there's obviously just really good reasons long term, and we've listed some here in terms of obviously the idea of access from anywhere. We need that, but also the real-time information that makes us productive and allows us to collaborate better. The ease of data integrations, obviously improving workflows and processes, promotes paperless environments, which has a lot of benefits, but it also improves accuracy when it's done well, where you're not repeating data entry, and improves redundancy, so it gives you backups. And really what that leads to is this blend. And we feel very strongly that it's not just all technology, it's not solving, it's the people and the technology. The idea that you want to use the mind share of your people for those sophisticated and complex activities, and taking the mundane, routine, repeatable activities and leveraging technology. And that's where you hit this business optimization. And we've seen this with many of our clients. We're doing so many digitization projects right now. We've done it ourselves, as we said, and using that as a bit of a case study. The other thing I wanted to mention too, in terms of benefits, is that I really do actually think this mix of people plus technology is also a way of attracting and retaining talent. Talent is hard, but the idea that you're really investing in this and you're allowing people to focus on the most meaningful work at all levels in the organization, and you're taking those mundane routine tracks pieces off of them and supporting them, it allows them to be effective. When people are attracted to that, that's something that supports very meaningful work. So, I just wanted to add that as another piece in terms of engaging your team, and it actually has that impact. Okay, so moving on. How come I cannot move that? There we go. So last week, we did a lot of work on how to plan. And so last session, we spent a lot of time saying, look, it's really important to first understand your business needs, figure out your prioritization of your digitization. So those things that are high volume, that are highly routine, they're very repeatable, and currently are very manual, those are the priorities for digital transformation. And then how do you create a business case around that? But we spent a lot of time, and hopefully people really took away that need to really understand your business processes. The idea that, understanding and mapping those processes, creating swim lane diagrams that considers all the different users and groups who are going to touch the process, and from there being able to form out the very detailed requirements. It's really, really important that you spend time with that before you jump into selection, because temptation certainly is just to go find a tool and jump into it. So maybe with that, I'm just going to just stop my share for a second. And again, experiment going on here. So I'm hoping that either in the chat, or if anybody might want to just reflect on either what they heard last week, and share those thoughts, or any questions, or how did it go? So what we said, we asked people to try to do, we said, try to see if you can create a process map. Take something simple and see if you can actually create some swim lane diagrams. And I'm just curious, were you able to do that? Did you even try? And don't worry if you didn't. And maybe it's just thinking about what we talked about last week. And was this a helpful way of thinking about things? And what did you discover, perhaps, that you might not have discovered? So I'm just curious if anybody might be willing to volunteer and just sort of either reflect on what they heard last week, or share the experience and what they found.
Lawrence Patterson here. The feedback is that yes, your your presentation is most likely preaching to the choir in that the tools you're presenting are effective ways of managing a project. That said, it is finding the time to do it. So I'm shrugging. You're not seeing me shrug. I guess I should turn on my camera. But the thing is that it is finding the time to do an appropriate swimline document. There's no argument that that is the best practice to follow, but when you're resource restricted, the ability to do so is limited. And I don't know, I've lost count on how many times I've tried to do a swim line, and I guess I've been successful in about 2 to 5% of the times that I've done it. Yes, they've been effective documents, still used, but again, it is finding the time to actually fulfill the requirements of the planning document. So anyways, it is good material, but it is finding the time to do so and implement it.
Yeah, I think that's excellent, Lawrence. I think I couldn't agree more. And you're going to see as soon as we get into the actual process of technology selection and what resources you need on the team to do that. That's absolutely the first issue. The idea that the first investment you're going to make is time and people. And the idea that you do that before you spend money and make a commitment to a technology is kind of the tension, right, that you're describing, and how to get to that, particularly with small and mid-sized businesses. I mean, we see that all the time and faced it ourselves. I mean, we made some decisions in terms of what that was going to, where we were going to invest to try to do that. But I totally agree with you. It's the constant tension there and figuring out how to do it. So we want to make some suggestions in that where there might be other ways of help, but it's absolutely true. Does anybody else have any feedback or comments? No? Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Lawrence. I really appreciate that. That's, you know, very, very pointed, and it's helpful. All right. Well, why don't we go back into the slides and talk about, there we go. Yeah, so the idea that you're getting, this was a very complex one. I'll tell you, for us, we absolutely, I had, you know, a team, and we actually got some funding for this to help get some resources to help us with it, because it was exactly that. We just couldn't get at it. In any event, I think the point here is to try to share what would be ideal best practices and maybe adapt them as much as possible to what makes sense and how you can use them. All right, so we'll get into part two. And as I mentioned, the first thing I want to talk about, now that we've kind of, in theory, have kind of created all of this idea of the detailed requirements, the idea that you're able to create a swim lane, you're able to understand your processes, and you're creating those detailed requirements, you know, you're in a position now to try to think about technology. But I do want to go into the resources and team first, and the path to success. And we've included all of this in the workbook. This again is ideal, and how you adapt this for your own situation is absolutely true. So there's some essentials, and while I say they're essential, the roles are essential. You may have people who play duplicate roles, as I mentioned throughout this, but ultimately, you do want to have someone who I call as the executive sponsor. So this would be a member of the leadership team who has accountability for the strategic priority and can make decisions and has a budget that they're going to have to answer to. So that's just this idea that, you know, at that executive level, you've got that buy-in and someone can do that. The next level is someone who's the actual technology prime, who's responsible for executing on the strategy. This may be the exact same person, but it could be two different people. Someone could be the executive team, and then they've got their technology prime who's executing, and that's just normal management structures. But the idea that someone executing, if they also don't have accountability, ultimately, then you're going to have issues there. You want to make sure we have both. This is where I think the point of how do you get those technology implementation specialists? And this is everything from assisting at that very front end. I can tell you we're going through this ourselves. We talked last week about a bit of our technology that we've put into place with respect to our business systems. We're at the next level, and I have some technology implementation specialists assisting with that. And we were able to secure some funding. Actually, IRAP was able to assist us with some funding. So that's something that people can think about to help with that. I can tell you myself, I find it very painful. I'm not a detailed person, but I also know that this step is really important. But the idea that a technology implementation specialist, so this could be a member of your own team. We had someone at one point in time who was very good at this, or you can get contract specialists. So, you know, we have a virtual CIO, I'll call it information management expert. The finance, well, we have this is some of the stuff that we've been doing, right? The finance digitization. So we have people who specialize in this, helping the client with it because they can't get at it. You have to fund that, and that might not be realistic in different situations. Sometimes your IT firm, you know, who does your your servers and so on, they will have sometimes specialists who have specialization in information management and business analysis. I would say just make sure that they do have that specialty versus they're just infrastructure folks. But there's some firms who have some very good people. And ultimately, this is the expert to advise, guide the process, evaluate the options, help the plan, and do the implementation, etc. The other ones are sort of, I consider this optional. We've used it actually because we had a very complex project where we had a project manager lead. So someone who's a specialist in project management background, who's really thinking about the planning, all the steps, the accountabilities, how to proceed, and you know, and so that everything stays on track, especially with a lot of moving parts. It's really essential that you are engaging your own team. So you have members of your own team who, if you think about the business area you're focusing on, who are subject matter experts. They understand your business, your business processes and the use of the technology and how it needs to work. And they're going to help identify the functionality that they need to be part of that process. And they can be part of they can be part of a Tiger team that's set up or whatever. So you want those subject matter experts on your team. And it's also essential, and this again can be a subset of this group, but the idea that you've got a pilot user group when you go to turn something on. And again, this may not be subject matter experts. In fact, sometimes it's good not to have subject matter experts who are deeply embedded in the selection process, but people where this is brand new and you're testing it out with them, so that you're piloting. So it's just kind of thinking about that in terms of the different people that you might need. And again, this is maybe the ideal, and it's just what might work for you and how to get at that. The other thing is there's lots of resources and tools. And in this section, and again, this is in your workbook, this is not meant to be exhaustive at all, but we wanted to share with you, there are tools that can help you do some of the activities we described. And I'd certainly encourage anybody, as we kind of just quickly go through this, if you know of others that you can think of, just add them in the chat. We want this to be a building repository that we're going to continue to build and share. You know, there are good tools to help evaluate and compare technologies. I've put some here. That process mapping that we talked about, there's actually tools that help with that. So our CIO uses Visio. It's pretty cool what it can do once you start creating kind of a graphic, and it automatically creates those process maps. There's also project management tools that are available. So again, these are things that, you know, you want to potentially look at to help you. And we'll actually look at one in a minute. Additionally, these are some of the tools. These are actually some of the actual tools and systems you might want to adapt. And we just wanted to share these because, you know, we know that when we think about technology, the very usual pattern around implementing technology is the selection really is everybody goes out to a community of people they know who uses what, and everybody kind of gets their inventory of what different people use. And that becomes their technology selection process, just what people have recommended. I'm going to go back and say, I think doing that planning in whatever form you can get to, even if it's not as fulsome as what we've described, so you know what your business needs is important. At the same time, you know, we're happy to share what tools are out there that might be addressing some of the needs. And again, we'll continue to build on these. But I think the idea is that you really want to be thinking deeply and not just go to a poll, even though we'll do polls on this around, you know, what do people use? Your technology selection process should be deeper than that. You should be really thinking about your business systems. So for example, on this side here, these accounting workflows, I'm not going to go through all of these. These are, we see this a lot on the finance side. Obviously, these are cloud-based accounting systems. And then over here, these are workflow apps that might integrate with these. And we'll go into these in more description. So these are just here for your reference. And if you know of others, again, please feel free to pop them in the workroom. We'll make sure that we'll update and make sure that's shared with you, so that you know, anybody's attending, if they want to be able to you know, get this information, you'll have it and we'll update it. Okay, so again, so there is technology you can use, there's people you can use to help with this, you know, adapt it to whatever makes sense for you. If you have the ability to get some help and support, there's different options and sources you can do that. We're hoping that you've gotten at least some tools that help you do it as much as you can on your own. Okay, so now that we're thinking about the resources that are available, I'm just going to spend a bit of time going into the actual technology selection and how you can get at that in a more sort of thorough way. And so again, I want to really go back, and I keep battering this point home, hopefully. The idea that you do that work up front and think about it. You don't have to be as sophisticated as this. You can take, I mean, you can take one of these things. The idea that before you jump into deciding which tool or app is going to work for you, understanding what your business needs and how it works and how the flow works in your business will be so important in terms of avoiding technology choices that don't really work for you in the long run, or that, you know, just don't get adopted because they're not used the way you anticipated and you've forgotten something. And I know it takes time to do this, and it is a slow down to go fast. And if you need to get help, get help. But it will be very, very key to helping with that technology selection. And I'll just show you, and it is in the workbook, how we've used this mapping, this process mapping, how we integrated that into technology selection. So once we did this, the next step really was looking at options. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of ways to get a really good coverage of, okay, we're looking at this type of system, and there's excellent tools. I put others in the list. This is the G2. It's actually called G2 now, not G2 Crowd. This comes from their site. And you can just use this, go there and you select what you're looking for. Us at that time, we were looking at a professional services automation tool. So you just put that in there, and you identify your own filters for parameters of what you care about. And they pop up and they link to reviews, etc. So it's a crowdsourced review system, and Capterra is another one, and there's all sorts of different ones. But it's a good starting point, frankly, to really understand what the different options are that you might not be considering. And, you know, a lot of them have pricing details as well, so it helps you understand that. You know, definitely word of mouth. I mean, that's what we do. We understand, we ask that. Again, the danger of just going to what other people use and thinking that's going to fit with you. It's important to sort of step back and think about that. In what I would suggest, and whether you use a Capterra or something else, the idea of having your own matrices and grid and understand, you know, what are your parameters that are most important to you, and trying to keep that front and center so that you're continuing to think about that in your technology selection and where do things fit. So you can just use a grid as simple as this, figure out what needs to be on the axes. So is it cost, is it your growth needs, is it flexibility, etc. You know, size of your organization and budget is going to matter. How much money can you spend? A lot of these tools will say it's really, you know, low cost, but all of a sudden you might be scaling and it's going to become a big cost, or there might be a very, very costly implementation. So you want to understand those things. You need to think, one thing that I think is really important that people should be thinking about is you really need to think about what period of time you want this technology working for you. Is this a 5-year technology? Is it a 10-year? Does it need to exist with you forever? And if that's true, what cycle is your business going to go through? Is it scaling, or is it going to roughly stay the same size? Because those factors matter. But also the flip side of that is that this could just be a stopgap, and that's fine as well. If it's just a stopgap measure, then you know you've got different parameters. So I think just thinking about the length of time you need the technology to work for you is really, really important. So with that, I'm just going to pause, and we have a poll question, which
I'm launching it.
you have launching it, Leanne. Okay. And we just want to know what people might consider to be their top, what they would put on their axes. What are the top 2 criteria?
And it's multiple choice, so you can select. Okay, everyone has voted. So it is anonymous, so nobody worry, but we will share the results right now.
Okay. So interesting. You know, it's interesting. Like, I mean, I think cost is just high for everybody. I don't think anybody doesn't think about that. But the greatest integration, that's very interesting. I think that this points to a real pain point that can happen. And again, I think you have to think about what's important to you. Good reviews and ratings are important, but the ability for it to work, I think, is really key, which goes more into more of the implementation. Okay, that's great. Thank you. All right. So if we move on, I'll just take that out. If we talk about evaluating the options. So once you've done that kind of casting your net wide and you're getting a lot of ideas of this or that, and you're considering your data, you know, I really want to emphasize that, you know, you want to do a 2-step process. And again, I appreciate the comments about time, but the idea that you might have one person, maybe 2 people, who's casting a wider net and doing a lot of initial demos with the vendors that are your top picks, you know, and this might be 5 or 6, you know, and these can be short, like, you know, whatever demos that those vendors are wanting to give to you. And really at this point in time, you're doing some pretty high level curating. It fits, it doesn't fit, etc. And the reason why 2-step is really important is, you know, really at this first step, quite frankly, there's a lot of promises made and a lot of simple statements that can be made. Yeah, we integrate with this, or, you know, that will work, or yeah, we've got that feature, and so on. You might check a lot of boxes, but really what you need to do then is take it into a deep dive. And we certainly did this. We had one person or maybe 2 people who were doing those initial vendor demos. They probably did it with about, honestly, 7 and did quick calls type of thing. But then the deep dive is really where you might have a pilot group or 2 identified people or whatever. It might just be yourself. You might not have those resources. And this is where you're really, really going deeply with the selected vendors. You might have the top 2 that you're thinking about, or 3, and you're doing really, really detailed Q&A, validating the statements and understanding with a lot of detail. And actually, in these demos, they often will allow you to load some of your own data and see it real time in action. We were able to do that. So it actually lets you see it and really understand where you've got coverage on your map and where you don't. And I think the ability to understand and assess the impacts of any gaps is important. But more importantly, you want to make sure that this really is giving coverage. So in this example, you can see we had technology A, and we had a similar map with a technology B. And we were able to see, okay, for our flow, it's giving us coverage here. Our other technologies are giving us coverage here. It's not doing great over here. So we were able to understand and visually compare. And that was just, this looks more complex than it's intended, but the idea of that process map that you're doing, saying, okay, yeah, it's covering here, here, and here, and we've got coverage there, it works well, and you're able to identify those things. So it's just one approach. I think the more important thing is think of your demos in 2 steps. So from there, really, I feel you're at a point at this point where the recommendation of the team, if it is a team who's doing this, is ready to go back and say, you know what, this is what we're recommending. So the idea of you can recap the priorities and goals so that you're not losing sight of what problem you're trying to solve. You're able to go through the thoroughness of your process, how you took these steps to really understand it. So all of this is just upping kind of the credibility and the validation of your recommendation, that you showed and you considered a couple of options. You're considering the business case, not just the savings, but also the efficiency gains that you're hoping for and the recommendation. You know, to me, this sort of opportunity by going through this, it really allows you to, with a lot of thoroughness, make a solid recommendation. And quite frankly, it also helps avoid those sort of dialogues that start happening where, you know, I've seen this happen in some of the boards I'm on with organizations where it's recommended and boards are, well, you know, what about, have you tried this? And everybody's got their trendy app that they're thinking about. And you can say, yeah, we've considered that. And, you know, you really are able to keep focused on your recommendation. So the final point I'll get to in terms of the selection is really, and you'll see a timeline at the end, it's really that decision, that go, no go decision. So there's a point where you have to make your decision and you're really getting into, okay, we're ready to commit here. And this means you're committing to a cost. You're also committing to a new technology, which means change in your business. That might actually, like in finance, some of those changes are actually quite material to the business. And you might be really, or other ones where you might be really thinking, okay, this is a big deal. So that idea of kind of going through a filter of saying, this go, no go, we're ready to commit. We've got this workbook as well in your spreadsheet. So I have it down here. Yeah, so the go, no go, the idea of the solution readiness, you know, can it be configured the way you need it? Sorry, that's probably very small. You know, has testing been done, or can you test? What data needs to be loaded? You know, it integrates. This is just one list of questions that you just go back and really validate. You know, we understand where we're at. I think another piece in all of this is really understanding risks. What are the outstanding risks that we think we have here? And to me, the goal ultimately is that you're making a decision with your eyes wide open, that you understand exactly what challenges and risks there are and how you might mitigate them, and what is a material risk that might cause you to stop versus, you know, we understand it, we're going to proceed, and it's just giving everybody a lot of comfort and helps you set expectations. And I'm going to say this go, no go decision is also something you will bring and reintroduce later after you've started the implementation and now you're ready to go live. The idea of you're going to cut over is another go, no go decision. How ready are we? Is the operations ready? Can it be supported? Are people ready to accept the change? And again, what risks do we have? So it's just kind of a filter that you can go through. And again, we've got all sorts of charts and so on that can help you think through that. Okay, so move on, and I'm going to hand it over to Todd now in terms of talking about implementing new technologies. Now that you've selected, how do you implement with best practices? So over to you, Todd.
Thanks a lot, Margot. Good morning, everyone. I guess since you're driving, Margot, I'll just say next when we.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, great. Just one point I wanted to bring up was just from the first poll as well, just around the importance of cost, which of course, particularly for small mid-sized enterprise, cost is always a key driver. The one thing we though did find when we were, and we do this with clients as well, is what you need to be careful of is ensuring that the technologies you're looking at will scale with you. So if the plan is to grow over the next 2, 5, 10 years, what you don't want is to choose a technology that won't grow with you, and you'll be forced to look and do this whole process again, 2 or 3 years later. So But I guess I get to do the fun piece, the implementation. And if you've done your design plan and selection correctly, implementation should be the easy part. Although the hard part of the implementation and where most projects fail is on the adoption. So we're going to go through the process of implementing. We're going to use the example of digitization of the finance function. We're using this example because it was on the poll. It was one of the greatest challenges we saw from the last section 2 weeks ago, and we're also seeing a lot of this. We've seen it with our own our own business as well as our clients. So hopefully, walk through the whole implementation phase using using the digitization of finance as an example. Thanks, Mark. So the key to digitizing your finance function is really all about getting your process and workflows to a state where you've got ultimate automation and efficiencies, and you've got what we call continuous accounting. And the benefits from this are unbelievable. And even for myself, internally in our own business, just the ability to make decisions at a split second and have access to information and data, even on your mobile, is unbelievable. And the time we're saving alone on month end in terms of trying to understand supplier payments and costing and invoicing is just tremendous, because we're able to actually track that on a daily, and even if we wanted to, hourly basis, and all at the touch of a button. So we had shared last week that we had really benefited from not only the finance piece, but the using our PSA integrated with our finance process. We're down 3.5 days each month of what it was taking us to do invoicing, plus a full resource. So huge efficiencies for us in this process. Thanks, Margo. So in terms of phased approach, or in terms of best practice, I should say, it's always recommended in any firm that works with you, or any technology vendor will always take a similar phased approach in terms of looking at, what is the overall design and plan of the function you want to automate, in this case, the finance function. And how do we build the change management piece into that right from the get-go? So that is something you can't do without. A lot of people think the change management element goes right at the end, but the change management piece has to be begun as part of the project right from the beginning. And from there, you really need to start with the foundational technologies first. So this is the core. So for example, in a finance function, you'd see like a HubDocs or a Xero or a Sage, but any function has a core technology. HR being similar, whether you're using Workday, Bamboo, Collage, there's many, but it's really the piece of the system that will grow with you and scale with you as an organization. And you need to ensure that the workflow technologies, then the next phases, are capable of integrating with those core technologies or those foundations. And that's got to be done right up front. Margo talked about this last time as well, is you really need to know what workflows and processes you want to automate, and what applications will automate that for you, and do those applications integrate nicely into your foundation. That's got to be a key decision maker. Thanks, Margo. So around phase one, in terms of the digitization finance piece, and this is really what Margo's been covering both in the last workshop and this, is it's really that analysis around what really isn't working for our organizations. How many workarounds do we have or do we need? And this is a big issue for a lot of organizations that we work with, is they've built all these organization-specific custom applications that integrate with their systems, but when there's an upgrade on the foundation system, they don't upgrade and it doesn't work. So those are real challenges and take up a lot of time and energy and bandwidth from your resources. So those things need to be looked at. Is there anything stopping in our process that we have to shift to more manual work? And what that usually results in then, do we need more people? And as everyone knows, when you're looking at your operational costs, people are always top of the list. You then move to the process map, and then as Margot's flow is shown, move to the roadmap on how you're going to plan, select, implement, and adopt. So the phase 2 is really the foundation technology. And again, using the finance example, we're simply giving you 3 examples here of some ones that we see most often in the marketplace, which is QuickBooks Zero and Sage. And again, the key here is these foundation technologies are not turnkey and save the world. So once you get these foundation technologies into your environment, they'll only be as good as well as the data you put into them and how you've implemented them, and then what workflows you can provide that'll create automation in your organization. So it's now getting the foundation and looking at, okay, well, how can we make our approval workflows easier? How can we make our invoicing easier? How can we make our payments easier? And how do we do that? And that's where the value in a lot of these systems are. But again, you need the foundation to start that. And you're going to see on all these phases the implementation and training piece, because at each phase of implementation, the training and change management piece is essential to adoption. Otherwise, as I said, the project will fail. Thanks. So in the finance digitization example, one of the biggest time consumers and bandwidth consumers is your document collection, processing, and management. You can see here, on average, the old workflows for these type of processes are often about 18 to 14 hours a month for small, mid-sized business. Whereas we've seen with effective implementations, new workflows are around 2 to 3 hours a month. That's huge from a resource standpoint. And then the ability for those resources to really focus on more value-added work. So HubDocs is a great example of, I call it sometimes a bookkeeper's dream, in the sense that bookkeepers spend about 30% of their time on average chasing documents, chasing invoices, chasing paper for month-end reconciliation. So if you look at HubDoc here, and again, HubDoc's just a simple example. There's many of these document collection and processing applications that'll integrate with the foundation technologies. But the nice thing about HubDoc, and I'm a HubDoc user myself, and our controller gets quite a kick out of it, I think, because I remember my first time using HubDoc. First few times, actually, I just was simply taking a picture of my expense with my mobile, and then calling him up and saying, I don't know how to submit or report this. And he would open up QuickBooks on his screen within minutes and say, oh, I see you just expensed XYZ. He wasn't even in HubDoc. It had already gone and integrated into our QuickBooks Online, and had read the receipt and already categorized it and recorded it in the system. It's just amazing. And it does that with all documents, anything that needs to be submitted into the system, and then has the technology to pull the data from that. And then it's just a validation rather than manual input. Phase 4 then is the bill payment processing. And this is where quality plays a big role, as well as automation, as well as automation and time saving. As many of us know, the back and forth in terms of communication and approval can be extremely time consuming, especially if you're a small, mid-sized organization, and especially if you're in an environment like we are now, where everyone's virtual. Trying to get approvals or signatures is very difficult. And the other piece too is printing checks. We're seeing so many of our so many organizations around us, both our clients are now purely going to automation, whether it be EFT or using Pluto to pay suppliers. It's just so much easier and so less time consuming. You don't have to log in and out of the bank to process the payments. And the checks right now, well, always are most susceptible to fraud. The whole check process, particularly in small and mid-size, are costing businesses more than any type of fraud in recent years. So Pluto, again, is just another example of a bill payment processing application that that integrates nicely with most of the foundation softwares. And there's many out there. In fact, there's probably more bill payment and document management out there. But it's great. I mean, it syncs to your financial institution. It syncs to your foundation, as long as it's a cloud-based, and it'll manage all of your payables and allow you to send payments to your suppliers. No need to send checks any longer, send EFTs, and the approval workflow is built right in. So it's just a matter of sending, submit, and the approvers just tick that box, and the payment gets submitted. All three together. So this is where you've got your finance function digitized. And what the key of this is, it doesn't necessarily, or it doesn't eliminate your accounting function. What it does is it builds quality into your accounting function, because you're really checking or validating a lot of the data versus actually manually putting in, and there's always room for error with manual input, as we know. It's also making sure that you have easy real-time access to what you need. As I said, I can call my controller and he has my expense from my mobile in minutes, where I still feel I have to validate, but I don't. And it allows your team to really spend more time on value-add processes, really analyzing the statements and the reports that you can get out of the systems, and really adding value in terms of looking at some of the numbers, whether it be budget, where can we look at operating expenditure, and where can we even save more time through automation. So for the outcomes, we're kind of revisiting this slide now that we've done the implementation. And again, the key part here is we won't go through the outcomes because we have already. But in terms of the benefits, you've got now the technology doing what we're calling the workhorse of the activities, is really doing a lot of manual entry, it's eliminating the chasing of paperwork and approvals. It's ensuring your suppliers are paid on cycle, and making sure that your invoices are getting into your system on time as well, without being shuffled through paper on your desk or what have you. And as we said too, even from a talent standpoint, because we interact with obviously so many accounting professionals, the people want to see, or people want to work for organizations where technology is present. The desire now to go and pull papers or invoices out of a filing cabinet is long gone. People want to work with these tools. They want to be able to put that they've worked on the technologies and the automations on their resume, and they want to provide input into how could they even move the organization even further. There's a chat there.
Can you see it?
Yeah. Yeah, so Lawrence is just asking, in utilizing the example of automating bill payment processing, the issue is finding Canadian-based providers to keep the data on Canadian soil and with the proper security certifications. So they've been unsuccessful. Lawrence, I believe there are Canadian-based, because we've used them with some of our clients. Can I actually get back to you? I'll double check with our accounting lead, because they've done a lot of research on this, and I'll reply if that works. I can reply to the whole group actually, if anyone's interested. Thanks for the question. So change management, the word that CFOs often find to be the fluffy HR piece of technology implementation, but yet most important. Just so you know that 70% of implementations can fail at this stage if users don't adopt. Thanks, Myrna. So we have a poll question. So the poll question is, in your experience, how easy has it been for your organizations to adopt a new technology?
I'm just going to give it 5 more seconds.
Okay.
Can you see that, Todd?
Yeah, thanks, thanks, Leanne. So yeah, I mean, and no surprise. I mean, someone is very lucky in the crowd that they put very easy. So they've done a great job on the change management piece. But you know, difficult is highlighted, and that's most people's experience. And it really doesn't have to be. If you I just go to the next slide, and there's one. It's got an animation, so if you click one more time, there. Yeah, and it doesn't have to be. You know, I've led global technology projects, and the key really is the involvement of the users, how the people feel they've been engaged throughout the process, and the people being whether it's your employees or the user base, the input they've been allowed to give, and the effectiveness of the communications you've provided. It was interesting yesterday. I was actually speaking to someone at a hospital foundation, and they were talking about implementing a technology system in a hospital in Windsor. And when they went to go live, they realized there was all these breakdowns. So at that point, they brought in some of the nurses to ask them why. And they were saying, well, the nurses pointed out pieces in the workflow as simple as, how would you get the person from the ER to the operating room, or where do you put the wheelchair after we've got the person to to room X, that they just never thought of. Whereas if they would have had the nurses, the actual users of the software involved right up front, things would have been so much easier. Next slide, Margo. So really, change management it can be quite simple, and the real key of this also is to make sure you've got leader sponsorship. So you've got to have your top executives not only sponsoring in name and in the importance of this technology to the audience or to the organization, but actually leading some of the communication as well to get the buy-in. So it's really upfront, you know, understanding how the change is going to affect your organization, and again, thinking of every little piece and making sure you get the key users involved in terms of providing some of this feedback. Change management leads are really key as well, because they become the subject matter experts of the implementation and can be go-to people in communication for the teams as well. And then establish and communicate the timeline. The other piece in terms of execution is constant training and support availability. So, you know, oftentimes making sure that your manuals are concise, easily available to your employees. Training is recorded, and there's someone or some group of people or subject matter experts that are available for support at all times. And then again, around the communication and the responsiveness as well. Again, too, you will have to adjust. You know, like the hospital example I just gave from yesterday, you know, you may have to take a step back and change things. So, and that's fine. It's just, again, around communicating that back. And again, just reinforcing, usually we look at, particularly in a small, mid-sized organization, and we have a template for this as well in the work, but usually around a 10 to 12 week communication plan upon integration. Thanks, Margaret.
Okay. Okay, so I'll just go into, we just have a couple of minutes left, I realize. So as Todd mentioned, the workbook has some of those resources and tools in terms of a change management plan. You know, so we've covered a lot, and really we're hoping that we've touched on what we think are the most critical things to think about. You know, we work with so many small and mid-sized organizations, and we understand how difficult it can be to get at this, because you don't have the resources, the people, etc., to work through these things. But hopefully you're taking away sort of some of the things that will make it successful. And I would completely agree with Todd, that upfront planning piece plus that ongoing change management are probably two of the most overlooked critical success factors in making technology successful. In fact, there's studies on it in terms of those two pieces. You know, we think about selection, implementation, but we want to emphasize this. So this timeline is just here to kind of emphasize to the points that were being made, is that there's steps that you need to take. and you're thinking about what investments are being made. There's investments in people and time and the change management activities, all the way up front to a point where now you start investing dollars when you've made the selection and you're moving forward, and then you're also committing to a technology change that can really affect your business. So that upfront piece and that ongoing change management is really, really important, and spending time on that. Implementing as well in phases so that you're getting that adoption, that you are carefully seeing the integrations are also very, very key, and taking time to train at each stage to kind of to reinforce the use of the technology and the technology use behaviors you need. You know, I think that that's the thing that people find most frustrating, is that going sideways. Okay, so final slide, just reconfirming, here's all the resources that we have available for you. We're really hoping that these 2 sessions were useful to you, and that you've walked away with something that you can use. That was the goal of this. Obviously, we're here to help if you need any help in any of parts of those phases, but really more it was to give you those resources and tools and thinking to help make you very successful in any sort of digital transformation, but in particular that focus on the business operations functions, and really feeling strongly that these things are very critical. We want to do them well and get them right. So hopefully we all have that. Okay, so I'm ending my screen share there, and certainly I hope I am. I think I am. Oh, no, I didn't. Sorry, stop share. And certainly very open to any comments, questions that anybody has. And like I say, we'll get back where we can't, and we're happy to stay open or hear from anybody if there's any comments, questions. And I appreciate people's time, so no worries if you just need to drop off. Anything anybody would like to share? Yeah. Great. So we're really pleased to have been able to do this. If there's other technologies that we learn about, we'll make sure that we try to continue to share those in that the workbook, and appreciate everybody taking the time with us and helping us kind of experiment with this a little bit in terms of format to try to really give good content to people, you know, in a way that they can really use it in, you know, a less than ideal setting, and also in a very condensed way. This is a lot of stuff. But hopefully that you've been able to take some good learnings out of it. And we will keep this open if anybody wants to have any further questions, or if they want to chat, that's fine. Otherwise, wishing you all a really nice day. Hopefully you are able to get out and enjoy some sunshine.